guys, this is Gamer Kyle. Welcome to another Pokemon Trading Card Game History video. I'm excited for this one because we're finally on to the current generation after about 3 years of doing this stuff. It's been frankly absurd that we've even managed to keep it going this long, but we are on to Scarlet and Violet, and oh man, there's a lot of stuff to talk about here. I don't know, it's a really fun set. It's not quite as competitive as some of the other starter sets are, but I think if you are going to do any drafting or any pack opening type thing, this is probably the best start that you could have. And we'll go into that as we do, but I just want to mention how now we have a ton of really cool artwork stuff that is been kind of trickling in as we've gone through, but we have even more of them, and more families get stuff here as well now. Like, it's not always complete ones, but we do get stuff like the Tarantula and the Spidops over here, with a very cool little story going on with a bit there too. But we do actually have some evolution lines, including my favorite of all time, the Gardevoir line. I really wish that we could play these ones, but they're not competitive, so I guess we'd have to wait until draft. But this is another one of the family storylines, just like the Emboar and the Charizard that we've had before, where once I eventually find where the EX is, it's a full-on the Pokemon evolves as the family grows up sort of thing, and it's just adorable, and I love it. It's so cute. It's just, I always like it when the cards like tell a storyline through their evolution, and that is absolutely one of the best ones here. We have a few mechanics and other general changes to go into here. First off, the EX Pokemon. So we actually have a couple of promos here, and they do sort of contribute to all of the EXs as they are here. So let's just go over the mechanic as a whole. EX Pokemon are returning from Generation 3, not Generations 5 and 6, where they are effectively the same as GX Pokemon, but without the GX attacks available. What that means is that we can have basic Stage 1 and Stage 2 evolution lines here, with corresponding attack strength and HP totals to go alongside it. Mimikyu is the first one that they ever revealed. It's a little bit on the frail side at 190 HP. Most basic EXs will have between 220 and 250 HP. There's one exception I know of that's come out at the time of recording, which is Blood Moon Ursaluna. There may be others I don't remember, but yeah, 250 is about the cap that we would see for the most part. This is very frail, but they do still have like correspondingly okay attack strengths and stuff as well. Some of the basic EXs that have come out in future times are a lot stronger than this, but this is a promo, so that's, you know, think of it on the same lines as like Snorlax GX or something, right? Where that card wasn't particularly strong, but it did showcase what the new mechanic was all about. And that's what this is here for as well. Lucario, 260 HP is again on the slightly frailer side. 250 to 280 tends to be the sort of range that Stage 1s go at. There's a couple that hit 300, think your Blissey and that type of bulk level. But yeah, they have reasonably strong attacks as well. I think a lot of the Stage 1s suffer from like free energy syndrome though, where most of them do take free energy to do their main attack for some reason, but there are exceptions, and that's kind of nice. And then the Stage 2 EXs, Ampharos is not the best example of this, but they do have the bulk to match. We're speaking 310 to 340, I think HP is probably the best one. They're on par with VMAXs basically. But they only give up 2 prizes. It doesn't matter what evolution stage you are, you will always only give up 2 prizes as an EX Pokemon. We do not currently, in Generation 9, have any free prize mechanics. That might change in the future, because we do have a new year going into the TCG and stuff before we get access to Legend Z to A, and who knows what Mega Evolution is going to be like, right, when it comes back. But for now, it's a 2 prize format only, which is why VMAXs are like even further out than they used to be as far as playability goes. The first EX that we saw for the Stage 2 stuff was actually Magnezone, and this one I think better exemplifies what the EXs are like as Stage 2s. They do tend to have much more efficient attacks than what they used to. You see the Magnezone over here, it's got like 1 energy and 2 energy as its attack costs. Most of the time, like, Stage 2s have been really hampered by the fact of a lot of them take 3 or 4 energy for their attacks for like no good reason, whereas this doesn't. And I think as a whole, this is a decent direction to take the evolution stuff. The difficulty is getting them into play. Make them more efficient than the basic attackers, and they'll see play, right? Like, we see that nowadays. Stage 2 decks, EX-wise, granted, but Stage 2 decks definitely do see a ton of play right now, and a lot of it is because of that, or other crazy stuff that they do. Usually both. The next cool thing that this this like generation does is the fully silver borders side of things here. I don't particularly care as much as a lot of people do, but I just like the fact that we've unified with the Japanese cards on this one. The Japanese cards have always had silver borders instead of the bright yellow ones that we've had. The closest we ever got to it was in Heart Gold Soul Silver with the faded borders. Those looked kind of cool, but it was always weird having those cards like stand out. And then our secret rares always had these silver borders as well, so they kind of stood out as well when you had like the full art judge, for example. And now every card has got that, which is really good, and actually kind of lends it to the next part, which I might change to just play these basic energy for now, because I like the unified look, to be fair. They're a bit more simple than some of the other ones. I think Brilliant Stars has still had the best ones in modern history, but there are some very smart design choices for the actual card itself here. I think, yes, it's easy to clown on the fact that it says basic X energy on the top here, when that's already kind of clear from the basic energy tag on the top, but the smart bit here is on the right hand side with the 2 energy symbols, because if you're fanning out your cards to see what's in your hand and you've got like a 6-7 card hand or whatever, what's the bit that you're going to see most? It's either the top or the bottom right corner, yeah? And that's the bit where the energy symbols are. So you can very easily see that you have, you know, 3 energy in hand or whatever, as you don't have to look at the entire artwork or even, you know, half of the art to see that. I just think that's really good design, so there you go. As far as the set itself goes, there are a bunch of reprints and stuff in here as well for the trainer part, which makes it really good for drafting, I think. We have, of course, the staples, your stuff like energy retrieval, search, switch, all of that good stuff here. We do get Pow Pad in here though, which is nice. And Vitality Band is also here, so they clearly don't want to reprint something like Muscle Band, and they don't want a Choice Band for the new EX mechanic just yet. But Vitality Band is still a pretty nice one to just have as a general buff, so that's kind of cool. What else we got? Pokegear is also in here as a reprint, that's pretty good. And then there's a few things that we can go over as we do for like replacing stuff, or just being like Ultra Ball is another good one, right? That's also in here. That means it stays in format for a very long time at this point, which is nothing but good if you ask me. However, I did mention this set is a little bit weak in terms of the overall power level, which means that it's a bit lopsided as far as how I am going to talk about this. We do have meta stuff to talk about, of course, even if not all of this is immediately relevant, and honestly, this could be put down here, but Sai, I think, is going to be playing it, so we'll go over it anyway because it's fun. The trainer cards are mostly all good. There's only really one that I'm not going to talk about at all, which is Katie, because it ends your turn for playing it, and even in a draft environment, that's like dodgy to use, so yeah. However, there's a ton of stuff that's in the off-meta pile down here, and a lot of this is really good in draft if you pick it up. So I'm going to kind of break a little bit from the way that I've done these before, just because I think this generation is actually so good for drafting, and I'm going to be focusing more on the draft side of things when I'm talking about stuff down here. You could consider it like half a GLC sort of thing as well, but I don't really know anything about the GLC format, and half of these cards are EXs anyway, so they can't be played in there, so there you go. Right, on to the meta stuff first, however, and I'm going to talk about the Pokemon before the trainers this time round. partly just because I want to gush about Gardevoir, but also, you know, it's my favorite Pokemon, what do you expect? But also because I think it's important to see how the new mechanic kind of goes into the format as a whole here. Given given that we have Mew VMAX, we have Lost Box, we have various Arceus builds going around at the moment, Lugia is pretty intense. These cards have got to be quite strong in order to compete, and Gardevoir might just be like one of the best that we have seen. This is definitely how you do a stage 2, that is for sure. It's on the frailer side at 310 HP compared to the biggest ones that we've seen, but that's okay. I wish it had more, but it's a Gardevoir, they never do, so whatever. Its attack is also, like, alright. You're not really going to want to use it because you've got better stuff that you can use the ability of this card for, but it will come up sometimes. For 2 Psychic and a Colorless, you do 190 and heal special conditions from this. That part doesn't really matter too much unless I guess you've been like poisoned or something. Maybe you could heal that, but you can't even attack if you're asleep or paralyzed, so that part doesn't matter. But it's all about this ability over here. And like, I've said this about quite a few things as we've gone into the recent history, but I think this might just be one of the strongest abilities we have ever seen. As often as you like during your turn, you may attach a basic Psychic Energy from your discard pile to one of your Psychic Pokemon. If you do, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon, but you cannot KO a Pokemon using this ability. That means you can't effectively force a switch out of the active, and that's a good thing because one of the mantras of Generation 9, at least when we were getting told about the cards and stuff, one of the things they wanted to do was emphasize comebacks a little bit more, and being able to force a knockout on your active using this would be kind of counterintuitive to that design. Now granted, we do see that later on in stuff like Dusknoir coming out here, but that's a bit of a different situation, I think, because this would let you KO basically any of the Pokemon you have in play and put yourself down to like 1 prize or something, and then you force the opponent off in like a Roxanne and you've got, you know, counter plays and stuff available. It would be very stupid. What this does do, however, is it allows you to accelerate basically any amount of energy you want, so long as the Pokemon you're accelerating to is a Psychic Pokemon. And it doesn't even matter if you have already accelerated energy to, you know, a Pokemon and then paid retreat that turn, as an example, you can accelerate that energy right back. It is absolutely bonkers. And we do have a bunch of Psychic Pokemon in format that do extra damage based on the energy that they have on them. One of which is also in the Gardevoir Evolution line, which is insane. That gives it single prize capabilities as well. So yeah, this card is unbelievably strong. It does have a few flaws, of course, especially to Sableye is a big weakness for the deck, because you do spread a bunch of counters to yourself, and then they do the same, and we don't really have counterplay to that right now, so that's unfortunate. But it has a lot of really good matchups, and this card is a regional winner in this format under a couple of different decks, like a couple of different styles, so it's very, very good. And it will continue to be good. It's one of the competitors for winning Worlds in 2024. We'll just have to wait and see on that one. Again, time of recording, that's next week, so gonna be exciting. Banette EX is not quite as exciting, but did see some experimentation later on especially. It's a 250 HP stage 1 EX, so a little bit frail, but it's because it's an item lock card. For Everlasting Darkness for 1 Psychic does 30 and prevents the opponent playing items during their next turn, which is of course a very irritating power to have. This time round it's on a stage 1 as opposed to a basic though, so it's a bit harder to use than say the Vikavolt was, and I think that's about the sweet spot. Vikavolt was a pretty good difficulty as well because of the whole needing to play 2 energy onto it, and one of which had to be its own color. This doesn't have that, but it has the evolution rule instead, so you can't play this on the first turn. I want to note the split line evolution for Banette here as well. We do have one that lost zones itself in order to give you a supporter card back from your discard, so that can also be a very powerful thing. And this one does kind of combo with itself as well. Poltergeist is a typical attack you would expect on a hand freezing sort of card, where for a Psychic and a Colorless, you look at the opponent's hand and do 60 damage for each trainer card that you find there, not just items. So supporters and stuff count as well, which is pretty interesting. Drifloon is not too great at the moment because we lost Cape of Toughness, and Bravery Charm, its replacement, is next set. However, it is still a pretty good Gardevoir attacker because it's single prize and does a respectable amount of damage. It's 70 HP, but for 2 Psychic Energy you do 30 damage for each damage counter that is on this Pokemon. At base level, that means you can attach 3 Psychic Energy to it using Gardevoir to put it to 60 damage on it, and then you do 180 to the opponent. That's respectable. That's a good amount of damage for a single prize basic, but we can do better within the archetype right now for not too much more investment, and 180 doesn't quite KO most stuff you would want to, so it's a little bit weak right now, but keep in mind that when Bravery Charm comes out next set, you can get 10 damage counters on this thing, and suddenly 300 damage is KOing most of the format. So yeah, this becomes a lot stronger as we move on. Holucha is interesting. This is the replacement to Galarian Zigzagoon, where if you bench this thing from hand, you damage 2 of the opponent's bench Pokemon, put 1 damage counter on each of them. This cannot hit the active, which is the first bad point about it. The second bad point is that we lost Scoop Up Net, so we can't reuse this like we could Zigzagoon. However, it is still very powerful in the right deck for fixing the math that you need to fix. For example, you could consider this in Lost Box in order to ping 2 70 HP basics so that Sableye can put 12 damage counters down and KO both of those basics. That's something it can't normally reach to, so it is something to consider for sure. Now, one of those basic Pokemon is Manaphy, so this can actually really help your spread stuff as well. If you played this in, say, Lost Box with Kyogre, then you'd be able to rid the opponent's Manaphy, like delete it off the board, and next turn go in with the whatever the attack is called, I forget. It's like a flood type thing that snipes the bench. So that's another cool application too. It's more than just Lost Box, but that is the first one that comes to mind whenever I see this card. Klefki is very irritating and does come up a bit more often in the future than it does right now, but it still comes up a little bit right now as well. If it's in the active slot, all basic Pokemon in play do not have abilities except for Klefki. It can discard tool cards as well, but we're not normally using it for that. Most of what this is used for is to deny any setup stuff, but we did kind of lose a fair bit of that. There's a few cards that still hits though. Luminion is a really good example. That's the big one that we still have. We don't have Crobat anymore, so we can't hit that one. But Tandem Unit from Rhydon that we'll see in a minute can get dumped by this as well. Flower Selecting is the biggest one. If the opponent has that in play, then as they're active, then they can't do a thing. So it can be a very good anti-Lost Box card too. And if your Lost Box matchup is bad, this is probably the way that you solve it. So keep it in mind, I suppose. Also, it's only got a 1 retreat, so we can use that with one of the stadiums we'll see later on. Skwovet, funnily enough, is actually a very good card, in particular with Bibarel that we've seen in the past. You can bottom deck your hand and then draw 1 card for doing so. The reason this is good is because you'll often have hands where in Arceus decks where you just can't play a bunch of them, but you need to draw with the Bibarel to search for something else, usually a boss, right? So this can let you bottom deck your useless hand, draw a card, and then if you can play it, great. If you can't play it, Bibarel draws 4 new cards, and those are 4 cards you will not have had in your hand previously. So, pretty good. Yeah, it's a respectable card, at least for the moment. So, yeah, we don't have the same methods of Mani proofing that we used to, though, so that's a little bit of a shame. Oinkologne EX is very maddening as its attack would let on. It's a 260 HP EX stage 1, so it's reasonably tanky. This is a colorless Pokemon though, so it benefits from V-Guard energy a lot more than some of the other stuff we've seen. And for that singular energy, it does 10 plus 30 for each of the opponent's benched Pokemon. That's the main attack you're going to see, but the second attack will sometimes come up if it gets enough energy attached to it. 210 for free of any energy, and if you flip tails it can't attack next turn. Usually fine. So this is a good tanking Pokemon because we get to play, it's not got an ability so we can play like full face guard and stuff like that with it as well, and it only takes 1 energy. It's in colorless, so we can use what's his face, I've forgotten the name of him. The colorless gym leader from Gen 5. I've forgotten his name. He's the rival guy too. Whatever. Sharon, there we go. Sharon's care. You could use that to pick it up as well, so it's just very difficult to actually score KOs against us. And like 260 HP is very big, especially if V-Guard energy is preventing the big 280 swings that you'll often see from Giratinas and the like. So it's irritating for sure. Most decks can't play with that small of a bench size, so this kind of just gets to sit there and, you know, keep hitting you for 100 to 160. It's very dumb. Armarouge is kind of neat. I think we are going to see this from Pepper this time round actually, because he's playing Arceus Rayquaza, and Armarouge is kind of important to that because of the way Magma Basin works. As often as you like during your turn, you can move a fire energy from one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. Its attack doesn't matter, but it's a fire type. You can use Magma Basin to accelerate to the Armarouge, and then move the energy off the Armarouge to your active in order to fuel whatever attack you have there. That's not normally something Magma Basin can do, so that's kind of a neat thing. The reason that he'll be using it is in the Rayquaza deck because Rayquaza needs to discard fire energy from itself to do a ton of damage, and this is a good way of being able to shift up extra energy so that you can do enough damage to one-shot whatever the opponent has in play. Pretty good. Revavroom hasn't quite seen its time to shine yet, but that's mostly because Beaverall is in format, but this is a really good energy-based draw card. If you discard an energy from your hand, you can draw until you have 6 cards in hand. It's technically more than Beaverall, but the reason it doesn't see play is because of the discard cost. It is very tricky to maintain that 1 energy that you need in hand to draw consistently with this, and Beaverall is just a lot more stable. However, Beaverall will not stay in format forever, and this card is definitely worth it in the right deck. There's quite a lot of different Revavroom that come out in the future, including a couple of EXs as well, and there's a reasonable shout that you could build a good deck out of them if you wanted to. Dondozo really only bears mention because of Tatsugiri, but for a double turbo energy, you can do 50 damage for each Tatsugiri in the discard pile, so we'll have up to 4. It's a 160 HP basic Pokemon that gives up 1 prize. That alone is worth noting because it can be somewhat difficult to KO something of this HP, like, consistently. And it only gives up 1 prize every time you attack through it, so that's fine in its own right. It's easy to set up in terms of energy cost, and it's just kinda cool. The Tatsugiri at the moment is designed to help set up the energy on it. It's a 70 HP basic that for a single water will search your deck for up to 2 basic waters and attach them to 1 of your basic Pokemon. So this can set up one Dondozo by itself, which is kind of neat. Its other attack, if you did have to use it, is like okay, 30 damage for that same water energy, and it puts itself and all cards attached to it back into the hand. You could presumably then discard it from the hand as well, which would be useful, so yeah. And then we get the 2 big EXs out of the set, the new legendaries, Koraidon and Miraidon. Koraidon is definitely the worst of the 2, unfortunately. It just has less support. 230 HP is really good. It's got some tanking potential in this set with trainers we'll get into, and it's the idea of it is you can attach up to 2 basic fighting energy from your discard pile to your basic fighting Pokemon in any way that you like, so long as you're willing to end your turn for doing so. Its attack for 2 fighting and a colorless does 220, and then it can't attack next turn. Problem is it's weak to Psychic as well, so that's a pretty big issue when two good Psychic decks are in the format, so yeah, unfortunately not the best one, but still kind of cool. People did experiment with it. There's like a Ting Lu that comes out next set that's kind of okay with it, so yeah. The Miraidon is much better, and Pepper's going to be repping this one as well. 220 HP, single energy retreat on this as well is very important, and once during your turn, search your deck for up to 2 basic lightning Pokemon, put them onto the bench. You'll note this is not a hard once per turn, and therefore if you search a Miraidon, you can search for more basic Pokemon again as well, which is pretty useful. Its attack for 2 lightning and the colorless does the same thing, 220 damage, cannot attack next turn. That's a little bit more palatable here just because we have some acceleration options, again like Flappy, but also into the next trainer card, so great segue into that, to Electric Generator. This card is like Max Elixir, but for lightning Pokemon specifically. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck this time, and not 6 like Elixir did. But you can attach up to 2 basic lightning energy that you find there to your bench lightning Pokemon in any way that you like. So yeah, there was often times where Max Elixir would hit like 3 cards or something, you could only get 1, this lets you get 2. And yeah, if you hit these well enough, then the Miraidon deck is just busted, right? Accelerate 8 energy into play, theoretically, is really, really powerful, so yeah. Nest Ball makes its return from Generation 7, and 3 and 4 technically from the old Great Ball. This is the replacement to Quick Ball for this format. We do not get to discard for our basic search anymore, but we also don't get to put the basic Pokemon into the hand. We have to use Ultra Ball if we want to do that. And that can be a problem because it means coming into play powers aren't as easy to use as they were before. Think Luminion, for example, or that Hawlucha that we saw earlier. If you Nest Ball them, you don't get their effects, so they're not nearly as useful. That is actually it for the new items. A lot of the stuff is old item prints here, so moving straight to the supporters, Arven doesn't kick off too early, but is absolutely busted, and definitely is like the strongest current supporter, I think. And it's like the one that's in most decks anyway. Search your deck for an item and a Pokemon tool card, reveal them and put them into the hand. Then shuffle your deck. I think I forgot to mention this actually. Pokemon tools are no longer considered items in Generation 9. This retroactively applies as well, so like Pokestop is technically worse than it used to be. You can't get Forest Sealstone off of it anymore. But yeah, Pokemon tools themselves have got a separate classification to what they used to have, and this is the way that you search them out. But that's kind of neat because it means that you can search for, just as an example, Rare Candy and Forest Sealstone. Sealstone, put it on an old Pokemon V, search your deck for the stage 2 that you want to go for, and then Rare Candy into the stage 2, just, you know, spitballing it, maybe God of War, for example, and make your plays from there. Very, very cool. It obviously lets you get any item that you want, which means it's great turn 1 because you can search Battle VIP Pass, and yeah, later on in the game it just gets whatever evolution stuff you need as well if you're going down that route. Or you could potentially get a switch, or something like that if you need to. Just a really versatile card. Jacques isn't really too common. This would probably be in the draft pick thing, but it searches your deck for up to 2 evolution Pokemon, puts them into hand. It's neat. We have seen Professor Elm's training method in like Generation 3 and 4 see a ton of play, and this is obviously nowhere near as useful nowadays because decks are just more explosive than they used to be. But searching your deck for 2 evolutions could be really good. You could search for like Arceus V-Star and Bibero, for example, so that's kind of fun. Yeah, this is a really good card for draft though, because draft decks will tend to play a lot more evolution stuff. Miriam is one of the craziest cards that like doesn't see a lot of play, just because it's maybe slightly too limited in the end for, despite how busted it looks. Shuffle up to 5 Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck, and if you do, draw 3 cards. So this is currently the way that you recover Pokemon, because we did lose Ordinary Rod, and Super Rod isn't until next set. Its supporter status is irritating. Supporter-based recovery has usually been difficult to play, and we do have Clara that puts the stuff back into hand, which is probably more important for most decks, because it can also get basic energy back as well. However, this is Pokemon recovery that also draws cards, and that is very powerful in its own right. So don't underestimate this card. It does see like singleton play here and there for sure, but I think Super Odd is just going to end up outclassing it when we get to the next set, because you want to use items for stuff where possible. Supporter cards are meant for like the draw, so yeah. Penny is a very interesting one, apart from my pose being extremely weird here. To just me. Put one of your basic Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your hand. It's Acerola, but only for basic Pokemon as opposed to undamaged Pokemon. This could be really good. It's very strong in draft, and it does sometimes come up in decks nowadays as well. It's very powerful for draft because it lets you pick up stuff like Great Tusk with massive amounts of HP and just shove it back in hand, so the opponent's turns, like 2 turns probably, have been invalidated. But yeah, I mean, these sorts of recovery cards do see play here and there. I mean, Sharon's Care is a very good card, right? So keep it in mind, it's a strong one. Team Star Grunt, not quite so good, I don't think. This is the whole energy denial type thing that the grunts usually do. This one puts an energy from the opponent's active on top of their deck, so it does blank their draw as well, which is a thing, but it's restricted to the active only. Flare Grunt just did it so much better, so yeah, not a very good card in my opinion, but it's energy denial. It's something that you could use potentially to, instead of the Team Yell Grunt that got rotated, so yeah, we'll mention it anyway. Youngster is a reprint of Shauna, but it is something that we do have for this generation, I guess. So shuffle your deck, hand into deck and draw 5. Kind of cool. Beach Court is a cool stadium. This is very good with a Miraidon deck, but also for Lost Box, since we can now retreat without paying energy, which is pretty good. Retreat cost of basic Pokemon in play is 1 less. This means Comfey can retreat for free, basically, which is pretty good. But that 1 retreat on Miraidon, and also stuff like Raikou, Raichu V's, it's a really good thing. We're going to see this card played in 2 of the decks in the game round this time, so pretty strong. Mesagoza is Pokeball on a stadium card. Turn player can flip a coin. If heads, search for any Pokemon, put it into the hand. I regret to inform you that Lugia actually plays this, because Lugia kind of lost its most consistent search for Archeops and stuff like that, so they actually play things like this and Capturing Aroma to try and get it out, because you really need it that badly. It sucks, and I hate the RNG of the deck, but I've got to acknowledge the card as a result. Finally, the 2 noteworthy tools here, because the other 2 are reprints. Defiance Band, if you are behind on prizes, you do 30 more damage to the opponent's active, no matter what type of Pokemon it is, which is pretty good. Choice Belt tends to be better, but in very slow decks, you can definitely take advantage of this, so keep it in mind, it's quite good. And then Rock Chestplate is the thing that Koraidon is supposed to work with. The fighting type this is attached to takes 30 less damage from the opponent's Pokemon. So, yeah, very good defensive tool. It allows the Koraidon to be effectively 260 HP, which is pretty tough to KO, to be fair. But, unfortunately, just not really it doesn't really have a deck that could use it right now. Again, maybe the Tinglu in the next set could be okay with it. Who knows? Now, with all the meta stuff out of the way, if you want to glance through the off-meta stuff, we will just kind of go through it here. But yeah, there's a lot of cool bits in here, so let's go into it now, because I think a lot of this would be very good to build around in draft. At least for the stuff you can get, because Ampharos and Mimikyu you can't, because they're promos, so good luck with that. Annihilate is pretty cool. It's only 140 HP, which is a bit annoying, but it has the really nasty Rage Fist attack. For a single fighting energy, it does 70 for each prize card the opponent has taken, which can rack up very, very quickly. This is a scary card to go against for sure, because late game, it's going to be doing like 280 damage or something, and just one-shotting even your big EXs and stuff. But it doesn't have to just be a late game attacker. For 2 fighting energy, it does 170 damage with Dynamite Punch. It does do 50 to itself. There's a lot of recoil in the fighting type stuff this round, but that's one-shotting almost everything. So, super scary card, just very frail to go with. Arcanine EX is the big fire thing here. I haven't actually mentioned the Terra type thing yet, because it honestly doesn't matter until much later on. but Terror is a trait that some Pokemon have that basically stops them taking bench damage. That's it at the moment. It's really dumb. For the longest time, I really hated this mechanic because they just did nothing with it. Anyway, Arcanine EX is a 280 HP Stage 1 EX, so very tanky compared to the others, and that works with its attacks too. For 2 Fire Energy, it does 30 plus 10 for each damage counter that it has on it, so if you don't kill it, it's going to kill you back harder, which is great. And then Bright Flame for 3 Fire Energy does 250 and discards 2 Fire from this Pokemon. It's respectable and definitely could be useful in a Skeledirge deck, which we'll talk about a bit later on, because this guy is also kind of good. But yeah, think about it with the Armarouge as well. If you've accumulated extra Fire Energy on the bench, you can bring it up with the Armarouge, and then you can Bright Flame turn after turn. 250 is going to KO most of the other stuff here. It's pretty good. Magnezone EX is a free 30 HP Stage 2. For 1 energy, it does 50 for each energy that the opponent has on their Pokemon. And for 2 Lightning Energy, it does 220 and then 30 damage to itself as well. 2 Lightning for 220 KOs like every non-EX Pokemon that you can draft. So, wild. Absolutely wild. It's not a lot of self-damage either, and like its first attack is still pretty good too. There are a couple of decks that can accelerate energy within this format, so it's really nice to have an attack that can just punish the opponent for that. Strong stuff. Only problem is it's weak to fighting, and I think fighting is the best type in this set overall, so it's hard to play this one, even though we do have a lot of good lightning support. Ampharos EX is only mentioned because of the whole tie to Flaffy in the actual game. We don't have Flaffy, I mean there's a Flaffy in this set, but we would play Ampharos EX even if you could pull it from the pack, because it's just not that good. For 1 Lightning Energy it does 60, for 1 Lightning and 2 Colorless it does 140, but if you discard 2 energy from this thing it does 240 instead. Unfortunately, that doesn't score knockouts that you need it to. Even with a Choice Belt that is 270 on V-Stars, most of them are going to survive that, unfortunately. It is kind of cool that you can use your Dynamo to Flaffy and evolve into something that's like kind of useful, but it's just not good enough, unfortunately. Staraptor is probably very underrated as far as draft stuff goes here. 150 HP, 1 Retreat Colorless type, so it can go into any deck that you build. For 2 Colorless Energy, it does 60, and if the opponent does an attack from a basic Pokemon next turn, you don't take damage. So that shuts down the big tanking type thing of like Great Tusk, etc. by stopping them from damaging you. They have to have something else as well, which is pretty good. However, not every deck in the format is going to do that, so you need a good second attack for draft, and Power Blast is that attack. 3 Colorless Energy, 180 damage, discard 1 energy from this Pokemon. 180 KOs everything that isn't an EX. So this thing is a bit specialized maybe, and Stage 2 is still hard to get out, but is very well tailored to deal with the draft format stuff. I think this thing is really cool. The only reason I've not even tried to build with it yet is because I can never pull it, despite being an uncommon. Very weird. Pachirisu, if you have a very heavy lightning focus, would be a very good draft card here. It's only 70 HP, but I mean at least it can't be paralyzed, so no Thunder Wave shenanigans, that's kind of fun. And it has the Everyone Discharge attack. For 1 Lightning and a Colorless, you do 10 plus 20 for each of your bench to Lightning Pokemon. It's not affected by weakness, so you can't KO water types with it for double damage. That's a bit of a shame. But this is 110 damage for 2 energy on a single prize Pokemon. That is a lot of pressure on these things. And there are really good lightning Pokemon in this set, so if you draft enough of this and like the electric generators to charge it up and stuff, this is a really strong card. I could definitely see this being a good draft pick. Lucario has 130 HP, and for 1 Fighting Energy, it only does 30 damage, but if one of your fighting Pokemon was KO'd by damage during the opponent's last turn, you do 150 instead. This is a fantastic revenge killer in draft. 150 damage will KO most stuff, and it's just really strong as a result, right? fighting type does tend to do a lot of damage very quickly, but it also KOs itself relatively quickly as well. And Psychic is not a particularly good type in this first set. You'll see I've got no Psychic types that aren't the promo in here, so Psychic is non-existent basically, so this Lucario is like super strong. Rotom has Junk Hunt. It's only for one item this time, but for a single colorless energy, put an item from your discard pile into your hand. If you didn't draft a ton of Nest Ball and Ultra Ball, this would be the way that you'd reuse them. Pretty good stuff. Could also use rare candies and stuff again in case you researched them away because you had to get into the game, right? So, cool beans. Crocodile, probably the strongest singular card in the set as far as drafting goes. 170 HP, a lot to take care of. It does have the rock chestplate that you could put on it as well, so it can be very nasty to deal with that way. For a single fighting energy, it does 50, then you flip a coin until you get tails and discard an energy from the opponent's active per heads that you get. So maybe you can buy some time with that, it's pretty strong. But for 2 fighting energy, you do a massive 180 damage. You do have to do 30 to each of your bench Pokemon. We can't mitigate that in any way. Not yet, anyway. But, I mean, 180 KOs everything that's not an EX, once again. And it 2-shots all of the EXs, so you are able to trade relatively favorably with this as well. And if this dies, well, the Lucario just does 150 next turn, gets the KO stuff anyway. Very cool. Some people did try to make the Mimikyu EX work for Gardevoir initially, because its second attack does 30 for each energy that's on both actives, so it like starts at 90, and if the opponent's got energy on as well, then it's kind of great. Problem is, it is entirely outclassed by Zacian V. The only reason you would ever consider this over Zacian V is that it is an EX, and therefore doesn't get Choice Belt hate, which doesn't matter, because you're gonna remove stuff, you're gonna like put damage counters on your stealth anyway, so it's like whatever. But it also means that you don't get caught by V-Guard energy, which is like fine, I suppose, but really, you know? The downside, of course, is that you don't have Roar of the Sword, so you can't accelerate energy early game, which I found to be massively important for Gardevoir, but also, you can't put Forest Sealstone on this thing. So you can't have that benefit either. I don't think the card's very good, but some people did try it, so there you go. Indity is a really cool thing for the draft stuff. For a single energy, this colorless Pokemon does Expert Nurturer, which allows you to evolve one of your Pokemon in play, which is really cool. Just search your deck for a card that evolves someone. We had this in a couple of forms before, but like we used to play this all the time in Gen 3 with the Make-A-Wish Jirachi. It was very, very strong. This can also put the opponent's Pokemon to sleep with Hypnoblast. Maybe that'll come up sometimes, but most of the time it is just here to evolve your stuff very quickly, gets into the stage 2s really well, and yeah, it's pretty good. Skeledirge, I mentioned this a little bit. It has 180 HP, so relatively tanky, does 190 damage with its second attack for 2 fire and a colorless. You do 30 to yourself as well, you'd maybe start to see a pattern within this set. But Passionate Singing is also really good too. For a single fire energy, this does 50, which is a little bit below the curve, but you get to accelerate 2 basic energy of any type from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way that you like. Keep in mind, Revavroom is a pretty good engine for drawing stuff here, like literally, right? It is your draw engine, and that discards energy to do that particular power, right? So those energy in the discard can then be accelerated with the Skeledirge. And because it's only for 1 energy itself, that means you can rare candy into this as well. And it's actually pretty good. Strong card. Quaquaval is also good. The Meowscarada is not as good, but you could probably still build around it. Like it's 2 energy for 130 damage basically. This is a very strong card though because of the Energy Carnival ability. Per Quaquaval, once per turn, attach any type of basic energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. Also does 140 for free energy itself, and 2 of those are colorless, so you can splash this into other deck types as well, like, I don't know, fighting, for example. Just saying. 170 HP is also kind of good as well, so that's not too bad. Yeah, the fact that it can accelerate any energy though means that it works pretty well with Penny on the basic Pokemon. So if you get like the Great Tusk, etc., which we'll talk about the big two down here later, but if you get those, you can use those as sponges and then like Penny and accelerate back to them and go from there. It's pretty cool. Spidops is kind of rogue in the current stuff. It is technically a deck that you can play. Like we do have Leafeon that you could play it with, but that implies playing Leafeon VMAX nowadays. I don't know. 260 HP EX, so average, I suppose. And whilst it is in play, the opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost is 1 more, which is kind of good for its attack, because for a Grass and a Colorless, it does 90 plus 30 for each Colorless in the opponent's active's retreat cost. To get this to KO something, I think you need 4 of them in play most of the time, which is just a bit too much to ask. On average, most Pokemon that are played have like a 2 energy retreat as a default, so your starting damage is 180 with just 1 of these in play. You really need to add more to that in order to get it to work, so yeah, I don't know. Pawmont is pretty good for the basic drafting stuff here. This was really good in pre-releases as well, because this is one of the trainer kits you would get. Electrogenesis, once per turn, searches your deck for a basic lightning to attach to the Pawmont, and then for 2 lightning and the colorless, it does 230 and discards all energy from this Pokemon. 230 is approaching KO in the EXs of this set as well sometimes, like all the basic ones, so that's really powerful. Strong card for sure in this one, and self-charges, which is pretty good. Combine it with EXP share, and you can do some really good stuff with that. Arboliver is the only reason this doesn't see normal play is because it's a stage 2. When you evolve into this thing, you can heal all damage from one of your Pokemon without discarding their energy, which is really strong. I love this thing, and it could definitely work with these whole like tanking fighting decks that we see in this set. It is a stage 2 though, so you do have to commit quite a lot of space to it. Squawkabilly is a pretty basic thing for draft, but it's a call for family Pokemon. Most opening sets do not actually have a call for family Pokemon, so this by itself is still really powerful for the opening stuff here. Also resist fighting, which is really good against Great Tusk that we'll talk about in a sec. Yeah, search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon for 1 energy, any type. Very nice. Kilowattrel is an interesting one as well. It is a lightning type that is resistant to fighting. Unfortunately, 120 HP still means that it dies to most of the strong hits from them. Unfortunately, even Lucario KOs this, which is a bit annoying. But it has a couple of good things for draft that other cards don't have. For 2 colorless energy, it snipes 50, and there's no bench barrier for draft, so sniping is pretty strong that way. And for a lightning and 2 colors, it does 140, discard a lightning from this Pokemon. 140 is still enough to deal with a lot of Pokemon here. Maybe if you're behind, you could Defiance Band and KO stuff that way too. So yeah, but it's here because it's colorless enabled, and there's a Wattrel that has Collect to draw a card, so that could also be pretty useful. Scovillain is an interesting one for the fire stuff here. It's a 110 HP stage 1, can also burn for 1 energy as well for like 20 damage, 1 colorless. That's okay, I guess. But it's here for Super Spicy Breath. For a grass and 2 colorless, it does 90, but if you've got a fire energy attached, it doubles that damage to 180, which, as we've mentioned, is enough to KO all of the single price stuff in the format. So that's really strong in its own right, you know? And if we have the Skeledirge, we could actually accelerate the grass energy to this as well. Pretty strong. Wugtrio is a bit more of a funny haha meme thing for real stuff here, but for 3 colorless energy, that's 90 HP stage 1, flips 3 coins, and for each heads discards the top 3 cards of the opponent's deck. We don't have a reflip ability in format at the moment, so it's kind of bad. Reversal energy in the next set is why people would mimic, like meme with this and be very silly. Both Cyclizars in this set are kind of good. The uncommon one for 2 colorless energy does 70 and 10 to itself, but that's really good at taking out evolving basics and stuff, so this could be a lot of good pressure early if you start with it. The other Cyclizar doesn't have a retreat cost, which is really good, and for 1 colorless energy draws 2 cards, so very good early game stuff again if you are able to start with it. It can do 100 damage for 3 colorless energy as well, so don't completely underestimate this as an attacker. Unlike stuff like Indeedee and Squawkabilly, this actually can attack, but it's mostly here because it draws cards for, you know, not really very much investment. And 110 HP does survive a lot of early game pokes, which is pretty good. Like Great Tusk, for example. This is a gigantic 250 HP basic, which is just unbelievably stupid, even for, you know, modern standards. This is just very dumb. But it does give up 2 prizes, whatever. For a single fighting energy, it does 40 and automatically discards a stadium card in play. I guess this could be pretty good with Mesa Goza, because you get to flip the coin and then discard the stadium with the attack, so that your opponent doesn't get to flip on their turn. For 3 fighting energy, this does a gigantic Tusk's attack that does 250 damage, which KOs like everything, but it also does 50 to itself. So it ends up at 200 HP, and then that can be a bit more exploitable. Yeah, just get like 1 good hit on this thing, and it probably KOs itself after 2 attacks. But this thing is really good with Penny. One of the decks I've managed to build in test drafts at the moment has been Quaquaval with this, and just being able to use Penny to bring this back to the hand, bench it, Quaquaval twice to it, and attach for turn, and you're good to go again. Very, very strong. Iron Treads is not nearly as good, but it also snipes, and that can potentially be useful in its own right. 220 HP, Metal type this time round, so different weakness as well, and it's using Triple Laser, which, by the way, we had in Generation 5 on Registeel EX, and it did exactly the same thing. Do not understand why 4 generations later we still have this. I'm still mad about that. It does 30 damage to 3 of the opponent's Pokemon for any free energy. Super expensive, but Snipe is still Snipe, and that damage can set up some good stuff as well. Only use it if you pull Penny, however. For 3 metal energy and a colorless, it does 160 and switches itself to the bench. That's not even that much damage either for the investment. Yeah, this guy's only really worth it if you've got Penny, and Triple Laser is like decent enough, but yeah, I don't know, it's still worth mentioning. Also, why is his retreat cost so high? This guy, I know it's heavy, but this guy's got a really good base speed, so I don't know, seems weird. And then finally, the non-EX versions of Miraidon and Koraidon over here, fringe usable. I think Koraidon is like okay if you've got acceleration for it, so again, maybe in the Quaquaval deck. It's 130 HP, it does 70 damage for any free energy. Maybe if you want to hit fighting weakness, that's okay, right? There's a couple of good lightning types you can hit, so cool. For 3 fighting and a colorless energy, you do 190 damage, insane for a basic, by the way, but you do have to discard 3 energy on this Pokemon. So the only way realistically you're getting this to work is if you play it with Quaquaval or Koraidon EX, but then why aren't you powering up Koraidon EX? Because you're in draft, right? Miraidon is a little weaker, but with enough Electro charges, you could maybe do some stuff with this. It's Electric Generator. I always make this mistake, just because I'm so used to the Gen 7 fun electric items. Anyway, 120 HP, 1 retreat, so good with Beach Court still. 2 colorless energy, 30 damage, not really doing much of anything to be honest. But for 2 lightning and a colorless, it does 90 and 30 to one of the opponent's bench. Again, sets up numbers. It's okay, it's weak to fighting obviously, so it does have a lot of issues in this set, but again, with a strong enough lightning core, probably involving Pachirisus and stuff here as well, you could argue that this would be playable. You just need to probably draft 4 generators, so good luck with that. This set is really cool, and I think it's cool for draft more than it is for actual regular play. But there's a lot of good stuff for regular play as well. Like, out of the gate, Gardevoir is absurd, and Miraidon did see some success, mostly top 16, top 32, but it did see a little bit of success. It gets a lot better later on, so we'll get into that in the future when we do. Thank you very much for listening, if you have made it this far, and we will see you for the battles in the future. Take care.